Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rising in Their Power, a showcase of young leaders changing policies around the globe. My name is Gustavo Torres, Director of Youth Advocacy here at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. This webinar is brought to you by the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and the Global Health Advocacy Incubator. We are so excited to welcome each and every one of you to today's session. So with that, I would like to show a brief video for you to learn a little bit more about our moderator, Lisa Liu, CEO of International Youth Tobacco Control.
Hi, I'm Lisa Liu, and I was a 2020 Youth Advocate of the Year Award recipient. The biggest lesson I learned in the past 4 years was that my voice matters, but my age doesn't. I was 16 when I first spoke in a legislative setting.
So we hope that LA County can stand up against big tobacco and protect our teenagers.
And I was apprehensive because I wasn't sure whether these legislators wanted to listen to me. But as the policies I advocated for passed unanimously one after another, and as these legislators cited our testimony as an inspiring factor, I became more confident. And I realized that as long as you're speaking the truth, your voice matters. In March of 2017, I traveled to China and surveyed 857 students in 5 schools across 3 cities. That's when I found a 12% smoking rate, which was 6 times that of California. It was then that I realized that in many other countries, there is a normalized culture of teenage tobacco use, and tobacco control became my mission to bridge this global public health inequity. International Youth Tobacco Control is a student-led 501c3 nonprofit composed of 200 members in the US, Canada, China, Korea, Japan, Philippines, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. We have spread awareness to over 120,000 youth internationally and legislatively impacted 14 million adolescents. My original purpose for founding this organization was to, 1, prevent teenage tobacco use globally, but secondly, to provide a platform for passionate youth to make a difference.
Hello, everyone. I welcome you again to the panel Rising in Their Power, a showcase of young leaders changing policies around the globe that is jointly hosted by Global Health Advocacy Incubator and Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I am Lisa Liu from Los Angeles, California, and I'm a second-year student at Stanford University. I'll be your moderator for today's panel. When I was 14, I founded the nonprofit International Youth Tobacco Control, which currently has 200 middle school, high school, and college student members in the US, Canada, China, Japan, Korea, Pakistan, Philippines, and Saudi Arabia. As you heard, up to date, we've spread awareness to 200,000 youth internationally and legislatively impacted 15 million adolescents. At the same time, I work closely with the amazing Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids as a National Youth Ambassador and was a 2020 Youth Advocate of the Year Award recipient. I am very excited to delve into today's conversation surrounding the power and necessity of youth voice, as well as how we can grow it across the globe. Now, why do we need this discussion? Because youth have a right and a responsibility to speak about what affects them. In 9th grade, I traveled to China and surveyed about 900 students in 5 schools on teenage smoking. Now, I discovered an extremely high smoking rate, and I also found out that the schools never had a student-run activity where students are educating their peers about the harms of tobacco. So that's what I decided to do with International Youth Tobacco Control. With our members in the cities Beijing and Henan, we plan an extensive No Tobacco Week. In this week, the members televised content through the broadcasting system, held lunchtime activities and discussions, utilized posters, interviewed students, engaging, and effectively so, 7,000 high schoolers in that 1 week. So coming back, youth have a right and a responsibility to speak about what affects them. Right means they should be given an opportunity to do so, host an activity, speak to legislators, so on. A responsibility means that they should feel an urge to do so. Now, we as organizations like the Global Health Advocacy Incubator, like Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, like my nonprofit, we make sure that youth have that opportunity to exercise their responsibility. Currently in the US, there's a very developed system for youth advocacy in many facets of public health. And we want this system to flourish in all countries, to all issues, for all youth. So today, we have 4 amazing panelists joining us. Each of them has done extraordinary work in either empowering youth voice or being the youth voice in their country. They care about a variety of issues, from nutrition to human rights to tobacco. Without further ado, I would like the panelists to introduce themselves. First, let's start with Danielle.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much, and congratulations on your fantastic work. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Danielle Walwyn, and I was born in Jamaica from Antigua. I've grown up there all my life, and I'm the advocacy officer at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, specifically with the Childhood Obesity Prevention Project. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition is a network of civil society organizations, both health and non-health, within the Caribbean region, really fighting for a healthier Caribbean, and specifically the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases. So if someone were to ask me how I ended up here, I would say it's a passion for health promotion and fitness and physical activity. So with health promotion, there's this understanding that we need to move away from shifting the blame to the individual for their health outcomes and really look at the environment. And so in 2015, when I became a fitness instructor, I began to look outside of the fitness classroom and really try and think of why is it that so many people are not able to be as active as they'd like. And I really got a really great picture of what is happening in their environment and the role that the environment plays in their health outcomes, or in this instance, in their ability to be active. And so through my work at the HCC, I've been able to apply this concept of health promotion and an understanding of the role of the environment in food. With the Childhood Obesity Prevention Project, a lot of the work that I do alongside the HCC team is really focused on garnering support for health protective policies. And one of the things that I enjoy most is creating a space to amplify voices of persons who may not have the opportunity to shine or may not have the opportunity to share their concerns and share their opinions. And specifically, one of these populations, unfortunately, is young people. But with the HCC's work, we've been able to amplify their voices. And so the HCC has prioritized the youth voice in all of the work that they do, but we've been able to really do this in a special way through our youth arm, which is the Healthy Caribbean Youth, which is a group of young people and young professionals who have come together who ultimately want to create and advocate for a healthier environment. And so I'm really grateful to be part of the coordinating team of the Healthy Caribbean Youth. Alongside Pierre, Carrie Barker, and Tammy Marie, we have a number of young people across sectors. So today, I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the lessons we've learned along this journey, and of course, learning from the other panelists. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Danielle, for that amazing introduction. Next, we have also from the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, Pierre.
Hi, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you again for inviting the Healthy Caribbean Coalition to be a part of this discussion. It's truly our pleasure to be involved, and I'm thankful personally to be a part of this space as well. As was mentioned, my name is Pierre Cook Jr., and I'm the Technical Advisor of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. Along with that position, I perform several other roles. So I'm also the Prime Minister of the Barbados National Youth Parliament. I'm a One Young World Ambassador, and most recently, I am the Law Society representative for the University of the West Indies Cape Hill campus. And in each of these positions, I've been able to see and use my voice in a way that could support the well-being of young persons and the representation of young persons thereof. And my passion is really driven by the fact that I believe there should be nothing for the youth without the youth. And so throughout all these policies and all these roles, my one purpose is to make sure that in everything, the youth voice is represented. Particularly what made me so interested in being involved in these spaces is looking from the outside and seeing that within a lot of civil society organizations or even government processes, more often than not, the youth are left out of the conversation. Our unique perspective and experiences is left out of the conversation as well. And so I took it upon myself at just about the age of 14 to get involved in spaces that allow for young persons to share their views, share their points, and share their experiences. I've been particularly happy to receive warm reception within the health advocacy space with organizations like the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, NCD Child, even with AstraZeneca and the Global Health Advocacy Incubator as well. And throughout all these spaces, I've been able to sit and be able to take part in active representation of the voices and experiences of young people. So my role today, and I think my purpose in life, is just to be that person that speaks for, those disadvantaged groups, the persons who are left out of the room, and the persons who have a unique experience that needs to be considered. So once again, thank you for inviting me and engaging me, and I do look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Pierre, for your life mission as well as the role model that you set for all of us. Next, we have Gian.
Oh, hi, Lisa, and hi, everyone here. Thank you for having me. My name is Gian, and I'm from Indonesia. I'm also a tobacco control advocate, and I was one of the co-initiators for youth movement for FCTC, or the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which sadly hasn't been signed in Indonesia, but believe me, we are working on it. I'm also part of the founding member of Indonesian Youth Council for Tobacco Control, which is IYCTC. And we have done several works as well, cross-sectorial works, and especially with young people all across Indonesia from 43 organizations in 20 cities. I will talk more about it later regarding our guiding document on meaningful youth participation, which is I'm very excited about to share to all of you, and maybe we can all learn something from it. But actually, going back to why I'm doing this today, why I'm speaking on tobacco control in particular, is because it comes from my personal experience. My grandfather died because he had a stroke, and he was a heavy smoker. I blamed smokers for years. I blame people for doing unhealthy lifestyles, but the more years gone through, I realized that why do people have unhealthy lifestyles in the first place? Why do they choose to smoke? Oh, it's because cigarettes are very affordable in Indonesia. The tobacco advertisement, promotion, and sponsorships are also everywhere and very predatory in nature. And they're funding concerts, they're funding sports, everything. So basically, based on that realizations, I'm doing all kinds of work, advocacy campaign, youth-led researches. And why young people? Because young people are the target of tobacco industry, and just like David versus Goliath, maybe young people are Davids. We are being undermined, and discriminated against, and seen only profit as tobacco industry. But I believe we can fight the Goliath, and we can win over the Goliath that is the tobacco industry, just like Lisa said in her video. So yeah, looking forward to share more about our work in IYCTC with you today. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Gian. I definitely agree with you that predatory marketing is a huge issue in all countries, and I can't wait to discuss more about that with you in the panel discussion. And lastly, also a tobacco control advocate, we have Sanelli.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. The name is Sanelli, as I've said. The name is Zulu, all the way from South Africa. Representing Africa as a whole. So for me, it's quite an exciting one to say nothing without Africa will happen, because then we need to be there as well. So I'm the convener of the South African Tobacco Free Youth Forum. Our slogan is a smoke-free generation in our lifetime, a smoke-free generation in our lifetime, which is what we want to see as young people in South Africa. And the reason why I'm here, I would say that the reality of the fact is that about 40,000 people die a year in South Africa because of tobacco. And as young people, we need to lead the campaign that says, how do we solve these problems? And how do we not become people that are just sitting on the sidelines and waiting for decisions to be made on our behalf without us getting involved? So I think for us, it's quite critical to say, what is it that young people can do? And the forum actually is a newly born baby out of a call, because my experience is that I've been part of the youth parliament in South Africa, where we were advocating for climate change, But we also realized that there was a need and a call for a voice, a tobacco control voice, or a movement that would be led by young people. So basically, we are the first official tobacco control youth movement in South Africa that is organized, and we've basically spread our wings into different provinces. We've got about 5 provinces that each have got chairpersons, have got coordinators, and we want to basically spread the fire, to say, what is it that young people can do? What is it that young people can basically get involved in? Because we know the reality in South Africa, for example, that tobacco costs government about 4.2 billion a year. And, as young people, we know that in South Africa, we're facing unemployment, we're facing issues around education. Should we win what we are fighting for, the tobacco control bill, then that money could be diverted into education, it could be diverted into skills development and many other issues. Therefore, our movement is saying that this is the time basically for young people to stand up, get involved. And I think for us as young people in South Africa, we understand that there's so many other young people that are unemployed. In fact, there's so many other young people that are not even aware of what are we talking about when we talk about tobacco control. When we talk about issues that relate to health matters that are brought by, or diseases that are brought by tobacco industry. And lastly is to say that the tobacco industry is quite strong in South Africa. They're marketing big time. And their target is young people. And if we believe really that young people are the future, then we cannot allow the tobacco industry, therefore, to target us as young people, and then we let them be. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'm hoping that one can learn a thing or two so that we can be able to hit the road running again.
Thank you, Sanelli. I definitely agree with you that the lack of tobacco control can contaminate so many other issues, and I'm hoping to discuss that with you as well. So now we're going to transition into our panel discussion after the amazing introductions given by our panelists. The way this will work is we'll bring up the panelists one by one, and we'll pose a couple of questions to them for them to discuss with us. So first on the floor, we have Danielle. And Danielle, my first question to you is, we know that recruiting youth into our movements is the first step and a crucial step in growing a group of advocates. So can you tell us more about how the Healthy Caribbean Coalition is doing just that?
Yes, Lisa, thanks so much for that question. So the HCC, as I mentioned before, has always made it a point to engage young people. So a lot of our recruitment comes from just that, having events, bringing in young people, ensuring that their voice is heard. So Pierre, who's actually, as you mentioned, our technical advisor, that's how we found him. He attended one of these events, and we noticed that he was a light, and we brought him onto our team. So that's one of the ways. We're also very interconnected. We have a number of different partners, one of them specifically being academia. And so we have been able to connect with young advocates who are within the academic setting, who do research across the NCD space. So that's one of our ways. But I also have to say, Lisa, we have had challenges to connecting with and recruiting young people, specifically within NCD advocacy. And so, one of the ways that we've been able to manage that is actually with Healthy Caribbean Youth, in the sense that, as I mentioned before, it's a group of young people across sectors. So we have been able to provide a space where young people can advocate for issues that they are passionate about: mental health, the physical activity space. So we've created a network of young people who can understand how their issue plays into this bigger Healthy Caribbean that we're advocating for. And so they then take the information that we share about NCD advocacy and bring that into their relevant spaces. And of course, we have, we offer internships, we have consultancies, and those also bring the young people into the space as well.
Wow, that's a very dynamic methodology from all different sorts of fields. Yeah, I definitely connect with you when you talked about the challenges that we face in recruiting youth, right? So that's why once we see talent, we want to grab onto it, right?
Absolutely.
We want them to then pass on the word to their friend circles. But that's definitely very relatable personally too. Yeah, and I think this is where this concept of responsibility comes in. We as youth should feel an urge to find organizations that would be able to amplify our voices, because this is our world. If we're not gonna speak up for it, who is? Right? Then I think as more youth grow aware to that concept, recruitment can really be a two-way benefit for both the organization and the youth.
Absolutely.
All right, and Danielle, now after we recruit the youth, right, then we need to be able to have the capacity, the network, and the system to help them grow their voice. Right? This is the second technical issue that we as organizations that grow youth voices face. So can you tell us a little bit about how HCC does that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we have lots of opportunities for youth to share their concerns, talk about their solutions, but HCC has been also pretty strategic. So we develop resources, and we actually have youth contribute to those resources. I remember actually contributing to the HCC strategic plan as a young person. So there are many different ways that HCC really provides the opportunity for young people to collaborate and contribute. We also create spaces for young people to amplify their voices. So we, create spaces such as webinars, offer them opportunities to write articles. And I think one of the ways that I mentioned before, in order to provide jobs and internships, not only are you providing jobs and internships to young people, but you're also giving the opportunity for them to take on leadership roles within the organization, which is critical for the organization itself and then for the young people to grow. We have people like Pierre who've taken on technical advisor roles. And one of the big things I think in terms of capacity building, Lisa, is mentorship. And I think that's one of the things that I found is most valuable about the HCC is how the leadership team really mentors the young people. But if we're talking about specific issues within the health policy space, in addition to all those opportunities that I mentioned before, we have workshops, we have webinars that are specifically about talking and creating this space, for us to discuss conflict of interest, for us to discuss industry interference and how unique that is in the Caribbean space. So we create those more technical spaces as well that young people are a part of.
Wow, I love the concept of youth influencing how the capacity of the organization can benefit them, because youth are so talented. For my nonprofit, it's completely student led. So I'm the CEO, and then the CFO, is another college student. We have board members in their middle school age, and once you trust young people, then you begin to find out, wow, they can do so much. So I think I really like how HCC is giving that trust to young people, because not a lot of organizations are willing to do that. So I really thank you for that too, for all the youth that you work with, for them to be able to get this opportunity. So thank you, Danielle. We're going to invite Pierre up to the panel to further this discussion with the work of HCC. And Danielle kind of told us about how we do something, how to recruit, how to develop capacity. So we want to ask Pierre, why do we need to do this? So Pierre, you've been engaged in many activities like you introduced in the beginning. So from your perspective and experience, why is it important to you for youth to represent youth?
Thank you again. I think what some organizations fail to understand most of the time is that when you're providing or creating policies or directives, or when you want to help in a specific area, especially if it's an abstract area like health, you need to capture unique perspectives. You need to hear the stories of all persons who are affected. So in having conversations about health, you need to reach out to those who are disadvantaged, persons in lower socioeconomic areas. You need to reach out to your youth. You need to reach out to your differently able persons, your LGBTQ communities, because their experience is very different. And I think that in providing the opportunity for all of us to be engaged at a meaningful level, in a meaningful way, give some legitimacy to your organization or legitimacy to what you're doing, because then you're not only creating an abstract policy that is based on your perspective, but you're doing some responsible advocacy. The importance of youth getting involved in action and activism and activity means that we are able to provide and present our unique experiences. Our youth experience today is different from the youth experience that our parents or policymakers have had in their time. And I know often persons say, you know, I was a young person as well, so I know some of the experiences that you've had, but we must acknowledge that the world that you grew up in is not the world that I'm growing up in. A matter of fact, the world that I'm growing up in is about to explode if we look at things in terms of climate change. So when we think about those realities, when we think about the fact that what was accessible then is inaccessible now, or has been exacerbated now, we then understand why we need to look at the youth of today to get their voices engaged, which is why as a young person, I've been happy to be involved in spaces like the Barbados National Youth Parliament, where I'm able to sit with policymakers, where I'm able to speak with persons at the highest level, the Prime Minister or Ministers of Health, and have conversations about, listen, this is what the youth experience is. And I know Healthy Caribbean Coalition has been really, really big on that type of engagement. So I'll give you an example. Whenever we have to work on policies, whenever we're looking at engaging the government, there's always an opportunity for the youth to look at the policy paper, to look at whatever the project is that we're organizing and give their feedback. And in that very real way, we're giving young persons an opportunity to say, this is not going to work for me. This is going to work for me. This is how I think you can best treat to this issue. And then we're able to create a more feasible plan, because then you're able to see that, okay, this may not be an issue along the line because we've reached out to persons who are going to be affected by this policy, and they've told us that this is what will work best for them. A perfect example is our school national nutrition policy, where we were able to develop in a special way what should be provided for students in schools. And at every step of the way, young persons were involved in the conversations with our Ministry of Education and Health. That is the type of engagement we need to have responsible advocacy and responsible policies being put in place that affect young people.
Wow, that's so amazing, Pierre. I definitely agree with what you said, how there's such a difference in generation and the cultures that we live in. You know, sometimes our parents won't understand what we're trying to do, what we're trying to say, because you don't really understand unless you've lived through it, right? Sometimes I totally understand when you say you would want to be part of the policy-making process from a youth perspective, because, you know, I've been to Congress where I've spoken to legislators and they don't really, they're really surprised that, oh, e-cigarettes is such a huge problem among teenagers, right, with 3 million high schoolers using it. Right? It's very hard for them to understand because they're not in a school setting. And that's why it's so important for us to come in and tell them that story. Yeah, so I really thank you for that perspective. Now, speaking of all these different issues, I also know that you've been involved in human rights advocacy, as you introduced. So Danielle was talking about how to build capacity in the HCC. I was wondering if you have any insight for how building capacity for youth can look similar or different across different fields, leading to the topic of human rights.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to start with saying human rights advocacy and framing your advocacy around the conversation or using the language of rights, I think is the most powerful way to share a message. When we understand that the Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration or the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, or even the rights as contained within individual constitutions, is at the base level, the most minimum things that every person should have in order to have a proper quality of life. And what do they include? They include things as the right to health, the right to life, the right to an education, the right to play, the right to vote. And these are things that are inalienable. So whether you are rich, poor, whether you are gay, straight, whether you're a man or woman, you are entitled to these rights. And I want persons first, especially on the call, to understand that you don't have to do anything to get access to these rights. By dint of being a human being, the fact that you're a human being, you have rights. And when we understand it in that way, when we understand that rights are something that everyone is entitled to, then we can have a wider conversation about why we need to remove these barriers from accessing these rights. So the right to health, for example, is a big area that everyone must understand. Health should not be a luxury for the rich and a privilege for the poor. Health is a right for all, and there should be no barriers to that. And in understanding and framing your advocacy around the language of rights, the levels of technicality may differ. So, for example, I'm a law student, and I'm able to make specific connections between the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the policies that a government has in place or don't have in place, and what they must do. And I can connect that to their legal responsibility. Someone else who's not within the legal space can make a social connection. So to look at the fact that there is a right to access to medicines, and then they can say, you know what, I have this right to this, and if your policy is that, you know, the insulin should be at a ridiculous price, and I don't have access to that. And socially, I'm left disadvantaged and in a position where my health is at risk because I don't have the financial capacity to reach to that. So in framing and in training persons around using the language of rights, there are different level of technicalities. And for youth, at its core, at its basis, what we need to understand that every single person, irregardless of your status, social status, gender identity, has access and has a right to health, has a right to everything under the Declaration. So once we understand that, we're able to frame our advocacy from a space of, we're not begging you to give this to a person as a privilege. We are telling you that you should put this in place because it is their right. We shouldn't have to beg for health. We shouldn't have to beg for medicines. We shouldn't have to beg for our government to protect us from predatory marketing. Our governments must do this because it's their responsibility and it is our right. So that's the most powerful basis that any advocacy can start from.
Wow, that's so amazing. I completely agree with you that this concept of rights being something inherent to us is something very important to start telling our youth when they're young so that they're inspired to take action. And yes, we're not begging for it, we're demanding it from the government because this is our right, this is our right, as you said, and it's their responsibility as we're building up this democracy. Okay. All right, now we're going to shift to tobacco control. We heard about nutrition from Danielle. We heard about human rights from Pierre. We're going to shift to tobacco, and we're going to start with Guion. So Guion, in your introduction, you said that you are a founding member of the Indonesian Youth Council for Tobacco Control. So I want to ask you, why did you found this organization, and what did you learn?
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for the question. So actually, Indonesian Youth Council for Tobacco Control was initiated with 50 young people from 43 organizations in 20 cities. And in the middle of a pandemic, still ongoing pandemic, because we realized that actually the threat in Indonesia is not only about the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's also about the tobacco epidemic that has been going on for years. We have smokers as young as 2 years old. We have a crisis on child smokers in Indonesia, and everything related to tobacco control is very much underregulated, and that becomes a problem because young people becomes attracted to be new smokers because of the manipulative tactics and predatory marketing from tobacco industry. But also on the other hand, we initiated this council because we want young people to be involved meaningfully and participate meaningfully in trying to engage themselves in tobacco control activities. Either it is with NGOs, with donors, with government agencies, with think tanks, but we need to underline there is a clear definition of meaningful youth participation, which I will elaborate later regarding our meaningful youth participation document. But on the other hand, also, we realize that the issue of tobacco control usually is being spoken by health experts. Like, I mean, we will realize it, like, people from public health backgrounds, people, basically medical doctors. So there are certain kinds of elitism that is maybe not intentional, because tobacco control should be for everyone. Health should be for everyone, just like Pierre said. So I think this becomes a realization that we need more faces in tobacco control. Maybe people who spoke, in favor of tobacco control from a gender lens, related to gender and toxic masculinity. Maybe it's people who are speaking about tobacco control in terms of, climate crisis and the carbon footprint from the tobacco industry, or even from the perspective of human rights and modern slavery, where we still have child labor in tobacco farms, especially in Indonesia. So basically, we want to see tobacco control from various lenses in order also for us to share solidarity with other kinds of intersectional issues regarding social justice and democracy in our society. So basically, those are the fundamental values why we initiated Indonesian Youth Council for tobacco control with youth from various backgrounds in 20 cities in Indonesia.
I definitely agree with you, Gian. An effective policy needs to have multifaceted voices in order for it to develop into something that will be applicable and beneficial to everyone in the country. Yeah, and I get what you're saying when you say more there's more public health experts in the field than other people, but everyone has a validity to what they need to say regarding this issue because it's their experience. Right? You don't need to go through a course to tell your experience because you live through it. That's something true that happened to you. So especially involving youth in this issue of tobacco control is so relevant because they are a huge group that is targeted. Yeah, and you mentioned how you have this guiding document on meaningful youth participation. So I want to transition into that. So can you tell us a little bit more about why this guide was created and a little bit more details?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity. I think several of our members are also here watching right now as we speak, and we're very much excited to share with you the guiding document on meaningful youth participation in tobacco control. Because in the beginning, we initiated this document because of our reflections of being engaged in the tobacco control issues ourselves as young people, as youth advocates. And we realized that maybe not every, participation is meaningful, but then, we always say we involve young people, we want it to be meaningful, but how do we codify it? How do we measure, how meaningful a participation is? Do we have like a worksheet? Do we have indicators or variables? Because when we cannot measure impacts, and those impacts will be easily missed by the public eye and easily missed by the people in power that we are trying to influence. So basically, that's why we initiated this document. This document is consisted of a history from young people's actions throughout the years in Indonesia, doing advocacy, research, and campaigns. So then the readers, when they read this document, they will see, actually young people working in tobacco control in Indonesia is not a new thing. We have been doing it for years, since 2009. But then, the progress that we make throughout the years is snowballing, and we just have to keep up with the moment. So that's one. So informative. And then second of all is also we composed a survey, a youth-led survey regarding why there are less young people speaking up about tobacco control. What makes it so unpopular? So apparently from our survey, we found that many of them are actually quite afraid because big tobacco is a big influence, especially in Indonesia, owned by the richest top 0.1% in Indonesia by the conglomerates, and they are afraid they will be getting threatened and everything. So there's there's an uncertainty, there's fear, but then when we acknowledge those obstacles, we kind of have an idea where to begin and the next steps, right? How do we mitigate the risk? Which brings me to the third point of our document is we have real tools that everybody can use, the government, NGOs, IGOs, even young people themselves, to measure their impacts. So we have two kinds of tools in our guiding document. The first of all is a tool on risk mitigation. Before you make any event related to young people and tobacco control, you have at least to mitigate the risk, right? Is it the risk is like could be physical, non-physical, digital, security, because at many times, the Zoom are being bombed and being hacked and everything. So how do we make young people feel safer when they are engaging in this issue that is actually, it's a big deal in Indonesia. And then we also have the worksheet on meaningful youth participation check boxes. So it's very easy to use. There are several indicators, there are several variables. All you do is at the end or on the planning stage of your events related to young people, whether it's campaign advocacy or research. Basically, you have to, see the check boxes, see how many check boxes that you have checked. The idea is the more boxes that you check, the more meaningful, your event it is to the youth that are participating in it. So basically, we try to make it, more measurable. And throughout for the next few months, we will be having cross-sectorial partnerships as well with international organizations and with the UNICEF and the CTFK as well. We would like also to share this document to our ministries and also provincial governments and other actors as well, to actually, try to influence them that actually there are meaningful ways for us to involve young people meaningfully in tobacco control. So yeah, maybe that's the whole idea. But then, seeing is believing. So I will share with you, Lisa, and the others on the chat box for the document, so for everyone to read. Yeah.
Thank you, Gian. I love your emphasis on a guide that is measurable, that can help us determine whether we're on the right track or whether this practice is helping us, and having something that's systematic. Because if we want any effort to be long-reaching or sustainable, it needs to be systematic, because then it can be repeated in different scenarios by different people to different issues. And I really love how you address all the concerns, including security for the youth, since that's definitely a component that we should be considering. And I hope that this document will be able to leave a legacy in your country in terms of empowering youth voice in all different sectors. Yeah, and a last question to you surrounding this document is, now after you develop this, people put it into use, what are some best practices for meaningful youth engagement that came out of this project? And how have they been applied to your policy advocacy work in Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So far we have partnered with the Ministry of Health for their national youth event, and we tried to implement, basically the document. We did risk mitigation and everything, and basically try to meaningfully participate young people. But it has also would not be able to to happen if we don't have allies, right? So young people, yes, we act and everything, but there are people who are supporting us from behind, our allies, basically the young, maybe the professionals in their fields who are supporting us. So for instance, in Indonesia, also we have several tobacco control networks that are supporting IYCTC, and one of them that has been consistent for years is actually Lentera Anak Foundation, where I used to work there as well. And the chairperson is actually the awardee of Judy Wilkinson Award from CTFK. And when Lentera Anak, what has been doing is actually trying to put young people in the spotlight, give them the chance to speak in media, press release, basically involving them from the planning to the monitoring session. And I think this kind of good practices, we're trying to promote it as well in IYCTC for many years to come. So actually, so far we have tried to implement it, and so far the responses have been very positive from the government, from IGOs, from NGOs, from donors. They all want to work with us just because our single document, which is weird. We didn't think it would be this big, people's reaction, but you will never know until you have tried, right? So, but apparently we're just very happy, and we hope this document can help people from anywhere. And as we speak, Lisa, I think I forgot something. We are now working on the supporting document on that guide to actually give a resources list. So basically, this document will complement for us to also handle specific cases like sexual violence in the social movement that we are doing in tobacco control, or maybe a mental health support, because many activists have burnouts, right? So basically, we also gather resources that we can access and everything, and also security protocols for individuals, for our group. So we compile it into one strategic document, and I think this is needed for any youth-led communities or organizations, because you don't want to realize that you need this kind of resource list until you need it, right? Until those kind of incidents happen. You want to prevent it, you want to mitigate it. So yeah, and of course the ongoing homework is, Lisa, I think to make it more than just a document, to implement it, to really enforce it among ourselves, among young people, and also young people advocating it for people in power to actually recognize our needs as well, and our safety and our well-being and everything don't just put us in the front lines, because basically we are, we don't have resources, we don't have much experience. What we have is our courage. Then, then give us your resources, right? Give us your connections, give us your, as an umbrella for us to be able to be activists and doing what is necessary, the thing to do for the greater good, for the greater public health, meaningfully and safely. So yeah, maybe that's my parting words. Lisa, sorry for taking too long.
No worries. Thank you, Gian. First, congratulations on all your partnerships after this document was created. And I think it deserves all the partnerships too. As the moderator for today, I went through everyone's work to make sure I understand you before discussing with you. And wow, I was very impressed by how in-depth and how extensive that guide was. And I hope in the upcoming months, you'll be able to attain more partnerships and make more impact. And definitely agree with you that allies, they are a huge supporting force behind any movement. And I just want to take a moment to thank all the audience members, since if you are here today, you're probably an ally in the field of empowering youth voice across all different issues. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you, Gian. And lastly, I want to move to Sanelli, who is also an avid tobacco control advocate. So Sanelli, I know that in our previous discussions, you talked about how you want to structure your movement to develop sustainable impact. You want to expand in a very systematic way. So I want to ask you, what are some techniques that you use to expand this movement across South Africa?
Oh, unmute. Sorry. Yeah, so no, thank you so much. Thanks, Gian, as well, for some inspiring words there. I think for someone who's been in the space for quite some time, yourself, there's a lot that one can learn. So I think for us, what has made it very easier, if I may put it like that, is that we are part of a campaign, a bigger campaign, which is called Project Our Next, Tina Abantu, which is basically led by CTFK. But that campaign is actually led by some of the tobacco control veterans in South Africa. And I think they are the ones that have led this thing for quite some time. And for us, we've kept on knocking on their doors, telling them that we basically want to learn, we want to know more about the tobacco control space, because I always believe that mentorship is key in any advocacy work, to not think, I say as well to people that the more you know is the more you know that you don't know. And the moment you think you know it all is the moment you lose it all. So our approach really has been a learning approach, to say, as young advocacy movement, we want to learn. We just want to learn. So we've been saying, first on our pillar is to really learn as much as we can as the first part. Secondly, to get these veterans on our advisory council, because we want them to advise us consistently. But 2 or 3 then was to say, how do we then make sure that the young people that are out there already doing work, how do we then send or rather train them to also take part in our movement? So we have a philosophy of train the trainer, which we are basically pushing towards these young people in the 5 regions that we are getting into. And I think, I must also share that in South Africa, there's it's about 20% of smokers that we have. So about 80% are non-smoking people, which already says that as South African Tobacco Youth Forum, or as the forum, we are the majority because we serve part of the 80%. And I think for us then is to say, how do we then make sure that we find the 80%, or within the 80%, we find some of the young people that understand that only about 20% are smokers. And I can tell you that the tobacco industry wants to ensure that they increase the number of smokers. And they will do well if they target young people. So for us is to ensure that we protect the 80% of young people, or some of the 80% which belongs to the young people, or some of them are young people. But also we then try and see as to how can we also ensure that the 20% gets converted into the 80%.
Thank you, Sanelli. I love how you describe your approach for expansion as a learning approach, because I've been operating my nonprofit for almost 5 years now, and I still don't know maybe half of the things in the field. And I love the concept of training the trainer, because there are these bigger organizations or bigger movements like Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids who've endowed me with a lot of help along the way. And I'm sure there's different organizations in your path that have lent a hand or provided some resources when you needed the most. So thank you for that very insightful approach. And I know you've been involved in many creative campaigns as you are running this movement in South Africa. So what are some new methods or creative campaigns that you recently deployed that was successful that you can share with the rest of us?
Yeah, I think, you know, in South Africa, I think I mentioned last time we had a conversation that because we've got so many challenges as young people, unemployment, youth unemployment, you know, underskilled, young people are underskilled, some of them are sitting at home. So I think it's been really a challenge to convince them as to why they should get involved with tobacco control. Because then young people ask you a simple question: how will it benefit me? Why should I get involved? And I think those are some of the conversations that we've been having with young people. But part of what we've done is to make them realize, or to also add some form of skills development, you know, life skills into part of our program. Because within the bigger campaign of Protect Our Next, you know, ours is to basically inculcate or really recruit as many young people as we possibly can. But these young people are available. You know, I think the beauty about young people is that young people are available. They just need the right message, and they need to be convinced as to how will this benefit them. And I also say that, you know, the currency for young people is really hope and future. You know, when you speak about hope and future to young people, they understand. I mean, when you say young people are the future, and you say to them, guys, by the way, if you don't get involved in tobacco control, that means your future is doomed. Immediately you get their attention, because then they now understand as to how tobacco control issues affect them. You know, so we're busy as our main campaign as well to advocate for the bill, you know, the Tobacco Control Bill 2018, which is our main campaign to say, how do we then make young people aware of this bill? Because many of them are not even aware of what tobacco control is. So what we've done then is we've said, we want young people that are already involved within the health space, within the environmental space, because we've been very strong on climate change. So these are young people that are already advocating. But then the second pillar is that we then ensure that they know as much as they can about tobacco control, you know, but through social media as well. You know, we've been running some nice campaigns on social media. Young people believe by seeing. So most of our social work or social media work has been, you know, with images, you know, image network, but also what we're doing now is to ensure that the trainers are capacitated well enough to say, even when our forum or head office is not involved, the young people should continue being able to take the message into the streets and into the public. But I think for us, really, it's been the skills training, life skills, because, you know, we've had things like Fees Must Fall, where, you know, they were promoting education, you know, but now when you say to young people, let's now promote a healthy lifestyle, healthy living, you know, they then say, what will I benefit from? Then when you push in the idea of skills development, you know, and you say, you know, you guys can become scientists, you know, within the health space, and we protect the future of young people, not only our young people, ourselves as young people, but also other young people, then they get involved. Because I can tell you now, really, Lisa, is that the young people are there, you know, really, really. I mean, the ambassadors that we've recruited, that we have, they are fired up. You know, when we say we're going into the streets, you know, they say, Sanele, when, how? You know, they ask you questions of saying, just give us the resources, tell us where, we will be there. So it's quite exciting. I think it's inspiring as well to say the young people are there, and I would like to inspire even others that are listening to say, organize young people within the communities, give them the right message, tell them the benefits, you know, show them as to how will this benefit their future, and you'll be surprised what comes out of that.
Thank you, Sanele. I love the concept of proactively reaching out to young people to tell them about what the future holds, because sometimes young people just need a catalyst, right? Because they might not know they care until they experience it, or they might not know that they can do it until they actually do it, right? And it's where we step in and tell them that you can, and that's how our movement spreads. And once they're dedicated, they're more determined than anyone to get this going. Yeah, so thank you for that insight. All right, wow, that was an amazing discussion with the 4 panelists. I learned so much from them. I hope you did as well. We're gonna take a quick break. This will be a wellness break that is hosted by Danielle, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Walwin, Advocacy Officer at the HCC. I'm hoping everybody has been enjoying the webinar so far. And so right now I am joining you in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia outdoors, which is my favorite space to be active. And we're going to be doing what I call a fit break. So a fit break is any movement that essentially breaks up sedentary time. So for us, you might have been sitting down so far watching the webinar. And so I'm going to invite everybody to stand up. And we're going to be doing 4 movements. Are you ready? The front kick. Here we go now. enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thanks so much.
All right, welcome back to our panel discussion. If you have any questions, so far we've already received a couple in the Q&A chat. If you have any from the previous segment where we discussed with the 4 panelists, or if you have any that come up as we discuss the questions from the audience with the panelists, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. I'm going to start going down the list from the questions we collected from the audience. So the first question is from Rinky. Rinky wants to ask all the panelists, can you please elaborate how you are sensitizing young people and involving them in the tobacco intervention work? How are you ensuring their long-term involvement? Are they entering into formal agreement? Please share. All right, so any panelists, when you're ready, you can start.
I can start. Okay, cool. So basically with us, I think what we've tried to do really is to ensure that they take ownership of their provinces or their regions, because then they should continue this advocacy work with or without us, because I feel like we need to inculcate the spirit of active citizenry, so that it's not us trying to convince them in terms of always looking after them or always following up after them, but to just ensure that they take ownership, they run this thing themselves, because then they can see as to why they need to. Because, for example, in South Africa, I mean, 42 billion is spent, with tobacco-related illnesses, and that 42 billion could be going into education purposes that relate to young people. So when we speak to that directly to the young people, I think then they need to realize that this is more than just advocacy work that the forum needs to be following up on, but it's more of active citizenry as an individual. And therefore we ask them to actually take control beyond us so that then we know that the fire spreads across. So I think that's what we're trying to do as well in South Africa.
Love the concept of taking control beyond ask. What a beautiful phrase. Danielle, Guion, Pierre, anything to add?
Yeah, Lisa, if I may, I really liked Rinky's, question on this long-term involvement in terms of sustainability. And I think it comes down to just generally having good communication with the young people that you're involved with, so that they understand the role that they're playing in this particular campaign or intervention. But just on that sense of sustainability, a big part of that is communication. So, as we're talking about just general advocacy, whatever sector that you're involved in, young people can understand, are able to communicate what they need in order to be more confident and more competent in the advocacy space to their allies or to their particular organizations, if that's who they're a part of. And then there's this back and forth. That's kind of the big thing that I wanted to emphasize there. And the other thing that Suneli actually mentioned, which I really appreciated, is, considering what we want the young people to take away from their experience as being advocates of this particular organization. Thinking beyond the technical and thinking of whether it is, Suneli, in your case, the life skills, or, for the Healthy Caribbean Youth, it's this beautiful networking that ends up happening. Because we know that young people are often in transition. And so, as they transition through different periods of their lives, what is one thing that we know we can connect with them on? And for the HCY and for HCC, the HCC family in general, it's big emphasis on networking and knowing that you always have a family to turn to.
Yeah, Danielle, finding that connection between the goal of the movement and what the youth wants, that's definitely very important. Yeah. Anything to add, Guion?
Yeah, I think Danielle and Suneli has added very great points, but I just would like to add one point that I think we need to emphasize is there is no one size fits all. So I think every country, every region, even in a country, has different contexts on how we approach the young people. So it's all about contextualize, because these young people, maybe they haven't been, working in health issues or in tobacco control issues, not in specifically in the issues that we're trying to engage them with, but they already have existing life experience, existing initiative that maybe we can tap onto, and we can listen more to them rather than speaking in one way, do this, do that, and come to us, but more like we can approach them, try to understand their context better so we know how best to approach them. For example, in IYCTC, we have 43 organizations in 20 cities, and these are organizations that are mainly not working on tobacco control. Some of them are religion affiliated youth communities. They are working in mosque and praying praying groups, etc. But also some of them are working in girls, in peace and security, in gender lands, and also working in plastic free campaigns and advocacy. So what brings us together, right? So that's how it actually we kind of approach them one by one. It's a long process. It's a very kind of exhausting process as well, but in the end it's worth it, because when we build genuine relation, we really want to understand and empathize and support their existing causes, and then slowly we try to make them understand the bigger picture, that our issues are intersectional, are connected, and basically that's how we got in. That's how we engage them, and that's how we involve more broad and diverse coalitions in trying to bring forward the advocacy agenda that we're trying to bring. So yeah.
Thank you, Guion, for that insight. I love how you mentioned that you should let the youth talk, let them let them speak for what they believe in, right? It's definitely not a lecture style that we're going after for all these movements. So thank you for that. Yeah, we'll move on to the next question. The next is from Lakshmanan, and this is more geared towards Gian and Sonelli. They asked, what are the major and popular policies to control tobacco in the national and global context targeting youth? Either of you can start.
Okay, maybe can I? Yeah. So basically, the policies that we're trying to promote is, I think this is, once again, it's a contextualizing, right? But I think on a global level and generally, we can agree that, what Lisa has mentioned previously before is predatory marketing. And it's rigorous because they are very smart. The big tobacco, for instance, in my context, specifically on tobacco control, they have so many resources. They really tap onto the trends, what the young people likes, etc. Right? So they adapted to those trends faster than we think. So I think we need to outsmart them. So therefore, the policies that we're trying to target and promote to young people, to advocate with, and actually on national level or even global regional level, is actually tobacco advertisement, promotion, and sponsorship ban, in any kinds of way, because sometimes they are in a way of a giveaway, a quiz or something, or they can be very subliminal, right? So we have to basically tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship ban. And also in Indonesian context is basically about making cigarettes unaffordable for young people and children. And I think in the US it's about flavored cigarettes, right? The taste they taste attracts younger smokers and child smokers, vaping, etc. So but at the end of the day, I think it's about context as well. But in Indonesia, I think I can confidently say that tobacco advertisement and promotion and sponsorships ban is a big thing here, and also how the tobacco industries really intervene our policies, like their accountability, etc. And recently also we also have been the interesting thing, I think, Lisa, if I may explain a bit, is I'm also running an anti modern slavery and young workers nonprofit foundation. It's called Emancipate Indonesia. And what I do is we do research in our foundation, and collaborating with an existing Lentera Anak Foundation, which is working for children's rights and tobacco control for quite a long time. We released a report recently. I will share it in the chat as well. It's Save Small Hands. So Save Small Hands is like how we prevent tobacco industry from benefiting from children, from its core to its from its production and to its products. So its product is being smoked by child smokers, and its product is also being produced by child labor in tobacco fields. So our report was like a health issue and a human rights issue, business and human rights in one place. And we invited National Commissioner on Child Protection and everything. We exposed the the fundings of the tobacco industry from their front group, etc. And we are still a youth-led foundation that has been around only for a few years. I mean, who are we to say that? But anyway, we see a potential that we can get what I said before, multiple lenses, intersectional lenses on trying to target an issue, so that we can see it from a bigger picture, and we can convince more policymakers to do more firm and policies as a whole, because it's not only about picking one or two policies, right? You have to do it all together. So that's why I think I will share the report there, if I may, in the chat, Lisa. That's from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gian, for your perspective. And I love how you bring up the corollary issues that are derived from this issue of tobacco and predatory marketing. And Sonelli, in the context of your country, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think with us, fortunately, as the forum as newbies in the space, we were fortunate enough to come in, and there was a bill that we are pushing for now, which is basically the Tobacco Control Bill. The Tobacco Control Bill, control of tobacco products and electronic delivery systems. But just like Gian, basically, this bill that we are pushing for, it's fighting against the tobacco industry to stop basically marketing and targeting of the youth. The bill bans the kinds of tactics making cigarettes also unaffordable for the young people, because I mean, with us, when you go to garages, when you go to stores, you find that the advertisements is right in front of kids, it's right in front of young people. But we also want to regulate the novel of products, basically. In South Africa as well, it's that smoking is quite cool. Smoking is a lifestyle. You know, they've made it to seem like it's a cool thing. So if you're smoking as a young person, you're seen like this cool person. So you can imagine almost kids. There's even campaigns that have run where they are pushing for smoke zones in high schools. You know, which is like horrible. You know, so those are the things that we want to fight against. To say we want to make sure that the government understands that they cannot do that. So for us, is basically to also this bill also wants we want to make sure that because they use celebrities and influencers, you know, the tobacco industry, to ensure that young people think that e-cigarettes are the new thing. I mean, their new style of advertising is they saying, stop smoking, try e-cigarettes because it's better. But we know that it's not better, you know, it's exactly the same. But we want to then, through this bill, which is the tobacco control bill, we want to then make sure that people understand that there's nothing better about e-cigarettes. And ours then is to engage government, you know, to make sure that they understand that the tactics of the tobacco industry are really, really not what we need right now, because young people have got bigger issues than them being promoted e-cigarettes and the likes. So yeah, I think that's the one that we are focusing on. But we also want to educate our young people and the government about the tactics of the tobacco industry. But that's through this bill again, because also this bill also says that it makes people understand what is second-hand smoking. You know, people don't even know that they've got laws, or rather they've got rights to say you cannot smoke next to a person who is not who's a non-smoker, because even a non-smoker has got a right, but they think they have got a right to smoke. You know, and in our bill, there's nowhere where it says, or in our rights, there's nowhere where it says people have got a right to smoke. You know, but I've got a right to health. You know, so therefore we want to also educate them through this bill that we are advocating for. So yeah, I think that's the current one, and that's what we are basically advocating for as the young people right now in South Africa.
Thank you, Sanelli. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear the different policy needs in different settings. And I can speak to, for here in the United States, definitely it's the flavor. So many bills are going around right now, either on the local level, the state level, or the national level, trying to prohibit all flavored tobacco products, because more than 80% of youth who ever use a tobacco product started with flavors. And that's the context for the US. But in other countries, it's very different. So for example, our members working in China right now, they're focusing on cigarettes because e-cigarette isn't a trend right now in the country. Our members in Pakistan, they're just trying to bring up the issue of tobacco use to the agenda, since it's not widely discussed at all in the country. So I really like the perspective that each of our panelists bring to this discussion about what is needed in each of their countries. Yeah. And lastly, I just want to ask one last thing from each of our panelists. In one sentence, if you can give a piece of advice to our audiences here who are trying to empower youth voice in their areas. Okay, in one sentence, what would it be? We'll go in the order of our introduction. So be Danielle, Guion, and Sanelli.
Thanks, Lisa. One sentence. I would have to put it along with the quote that I had shared earlier. Pre-context, we know that we have these amazing young people, but as you had mentioned earlier, and you applauded and you gave kudos to the allies that are on the call, I have to say, just all of our allies, continue to listen to young people, continue to listen to the challenges that they bring up, but the solutions that they also offer.
Thank you, Danielle. Guion?
One sentence, right? The secret to speaking is listening. So listen more before we claim we understand young people, we understand the issues that we're talking about. Sometimes things are not really new. Sometimes the solutions are already there and on progress. We just have to amplify it. Doesn't have to get the mic from them, let them speak for themselves and see the magic works. So secret to speaking is listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Gian and Sonali.
Sure. One sentence, quite a tough one, considering that we are youth advocates. So we speak. But anyways, I'll also relate it to the quotation that I put forward, which say, some may claim our young people are helpless, but I beg to differ. Our young people are just merely used less. But given enough opportunities to express themselves, they're a force to be reckoned with. And I think when I say that, it's because in South Africa, we've seen what happened in 1976, that all changes, all revolution in South Africa, they were led by young people, and I believe that in everywhere, or rather everywhere, in every part of the world, if you want to see real change, organize young people, put them into one room, speak a message that they understand, relate with them. As Gianna also said, don't enforce the message to them. Find out from them, what would they do if they were given an opportunity to basically drive a message? And I think for me, that's the critical part, to say, you get them involved, you give them the power, you give them the control and the resources, you'd be amazed what they'll do.
Thank you, Sonali, and thank you to all the rest of the panelists. This has been a very deep and a complex discussion about how we can grow youth voice around the globe. Danielle and Pierre, your efforts in the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, networking with all the different youth and partners, and establishing this whole system for engagement and mentorship, that's very appreciated. Gian, your guide to meaningful youth engagement that has influenced quite a lot of policies in Indonesia. I hope the best for you as you continue on your endeavor. And Sonali, your initiative to meet youth where they are. I love that concept. And so much what we discussed today, I can relate to and very inspired by. So for the rest of the audience, if you found what we discussed today substantive and would like to learn more about youth empowerment efforts around the globe or join the movement, you can visit tobaccofreekids.org and advocacyincubator.org to find out more. And I hope to see you in a future movement along with our panelists. Thank you so much.